All right, how's everybody doing? Hotep. Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, election writer. I'm the founder of the African History Network Facebook fan page as well. So it is Wednesday, November 7th, 2018. It's the day after midterm elections, and I was up late last night and posting articles on Facebook and watching the returns. I was watching the returns ABC News. You saw me share the broadcast here on my Facebook fan page, and also the 5-hour broadcast that Roland Martin did as well. So I was up late, as many of you were. And I want to talk about this breaking news story here. And this is dealing with Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, right? So we know that the Democrats took back control of the House of Representatives. There's still some races in the U.S. Senate that have not been called yet. We saw U.S. Senator John Tester, Democrat, just won his seat. He retained his seat, and I think he's from Montana. So a lot of this stuff is still up in the air. Okay, but what's not up in the air is that Donald Trump has forced out Jeff Sessions as Attorney General. Okay, and many people, all the pundits, were expecting this to take place right after midterm elections. Okay, sometime after midterm elections. Okay, some people thought maybe it'd be January or sometime December, but it's the next day. Okay. And if you saw the press conference, Trump did today, okay, you could tell Trump is really pissed. Now, he tried to act like, the Republicans did so well and they won. No, they lost control of the House. They lost control. They lost some governorships, some Senate seats they lost. Now, it's not clear how many Senate seats they're actually going to gain. There are a few that they gained. But Trump is scared. Trump is scared because now Democrats have subpoena power. They are in control of all of the committees in the House of Representatives, including the House Intelligence Committee. They can subpoena his taxes, all of this stuff. Okay, so he forced Jefferson Sessions out today. New York Times reports Donald Trump forced out attorney Jeff Sessions on Wednesday, ending a partnership that soured almost from the start of the administration and degenerated into one of the most acrimonious public standoffs between a commander-in-chief and a senior cabinet member in modern American history. Okay, now we could also call this when white supremacists attack, because these are both two white supremacists. And Trump is attacking Sessions, and Sessions has really not said a whole lot of negative things about Trump. We could really call this when white supremacists attack. Personally, I don't feel sorry for either one of them. Okay, now I did want Sessions to stay because what Trump wants to do, he wants to get Sessions. Sessions had to recuse himself because he lied in his confirmation hearing for Attorney General dealing with contacts with Russia during the Trump campaign, because he was part of the Trump campaign as well. And so he had to recuse himself from the Russian investigation that makes Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, that makes him in charge of the Russian investigation, and Robert Mueller reports to Rod Rosenstein. Trump really wants to shut down the investigation, even though he says he has no plans to do that. Don't believe him. Okay, he's told 6,250 false and misleading statements. Okay, in the first 21 months of his presidency. So don't believe that. He wants to shut down Mueller, and then next he's probably going to try to get rid of Rosenstein. Okay, Rosenstein. So hopefully Mueller needs to come with like some investigations like today, because there's no telling how long Mueller's still going to be there. So Jeff Sessions' resignation, made at the president's request, was being delivered to Chief of Staff John Kelly. And it came just a day after midterm elections in which Democrats captured control of the House of Representatives, but Republican success in holding on to the U.S. Senate and building their slim majority may make it easier for Trump to confirm a successor. So here's what happens. See, this is why the U.S. Senate is so important. This is why civics needs to be taught in every school. Civics needs to be taught in our homes, things like this. People don't understand. Republicans wanted to maintain control of the U.S. Senate. Now, because still there are about 3 or 4 Senate races that still have to be called, they're still tabulating the votes. We don't know what the Senate majority will be. But the reason why Republicans want to control the U.S. Senate is because Supreme Court justice nominations have to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. And it's usually a 60-vote margin. When it came to Neil Gorsuch, they employed they employed the nuclear option, reduced the threshold from 60 down to 51. And this unqualified Supreme Court nominee, Neil Gorsuch, was able to slip in, okay? And he was able to get, I forgot what it was, 51, I think it was 51, something like that. But they lowered the threshold for him. The other thing that's extremely important and that people don't pay attention to is for federal court nominations. They are approved by the U.S. Senate. Has nothing to do with the House of Representatives. So there were about 107 federal court vacancies for judges. These are lifetime appointments when Trump came into office. The reason why was because the last 2 years of President Obama, Mitch McConnell and the Republicans blocked most of President Obama's nominations to the federal bench. And this is what people don't want to talk about. And they were hoping somehow there would be a Republican president. This left these vacancies for Trump to fill. What Trump is doing is that he is filling the federal bench with very young, conservative, ultra-conservative, white male judges, predominantly white male judges, who can be on that federal bench for the next 30, 40 years. It's a lifetime appointment. And it's changing the landscape of the federal bench. This is why they want to maintain control of the U.S. Senate. This is why I tell people who talk about voting, why should you vote and don't understand voting and all this stuff. I'm like, dude, do you understand this stuff? I mean, you need to watch my broadcast. I don't know where you've been. Okay, this is why they want to maintain control of the U.S. Senate. The other thing is because of confirmations for Trump's nominations or a president's nominations for his cabinet go through the U.S. Senate. They don't go through the House of Representatives. So, Secretary of Education, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency Secretary, Secretary of Energy, Attorney General. The Attorney General has to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. A new Attorney General, Trump has to nominate one, has to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. This is why the Senate is so extremely important. The other thing is that if the Democrats want to impeach Trump based upon Article 2, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, most people need to read the U.S. Constitution. I ain't read it, okay? U.S. Constitution, supreme law of the land. Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution clearly tells you that the U.S. Constitution and all of the previous treaties and all of the subsequent treaties are the supreme law of the land. You can get this book or any other ones, The Declaration of Independence and Other Great Documents of American History. The Declaration of Independence and Other Great Documents of American History, okay? That's put out by Dover Books. This is about $2, and maybe with inflation, it may be $20 now, I don't know. But get something like that, okay? So what happens is, if Democrats, after Mueller completes his investigation, because let me just say this, an impeachment should not be partisan. An impeachment of a president should not be partisan. What I mean by this is you don't impeach a president because you don't like the president. You don't impeach a president because you lost the last election and you're bitter. It should be based upon Article 2, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution dealing with high crimes and misdemeanors. It should be because of a severe violation. So the impeachment of a president is very serious, and it should not be partisan. So they need to wait for Mueller to complete his investigation so they have the evidence, okay? They may have to reopen the House Intelligence Committee investigation into Russia. Okay, they may have to do that. I don't know. But it has to be based upon the evidence. Now, it takes 218 votes to get anything passed out of the House of Representatives. There are 435 members of the U.S. House of Representatives. Okay? And so Democrats have a majority now. I'm not sure. I think they maybe still be counting some races. So they may end up with 230, something like that. I forgot the exact number that they'll end up with. Okay? Or a little more than 230. They need 218 votes in the House of Representatives to impeach a president, which means they're going to put him on trial. But you need 2/3 of the 100 votes in the U.S. Senate to find the president guilty when he's impeached, because the trial is held in the U.S. Senate. So that's 67 out of 100. Okay? This is another reason why Republicans wanted to maintain a majority in the U.S. Senate. However, the last thing Trump wants to do is to be put on trial, because then he has to testify penalty of perjury. If he lies, then there are consequences for that. Okay? And Trump can't tell the truth. Trump can't tell the truth to save his life, unless it's in a deposition that Timothy O'Brien did, who wrote the book Trump Nation. They called Trump in like 30 lies when he was testifying, because he was telling the truth. But in something like this here, there's a reason why Trump's attorneys did not want him to interview with Robert Mueller, because they know he won't be able to tell the truth. So the last thing Trump wants to do is to be put on trial. Okay? All right, let's continue. Everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. Okay? Well, no. So Marcy said, I don't think they should impeach him. Let him finish his term. No. Congress needs to do their damn job. That the job of the Congress, based upon Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, is to be a check on the president. If the president is in violation of his duties based upon the Constitution, then Congress should follow. Congress should do their job. That's part of their job, to impeach a president. That's why it's in the Constitution. However, it has to be based upon real solid evidence. It can't be something flimsy. It needs to be based upon real solid evidence. So no, not finish his term. Congress needs to do their job. This is one of the reasons why Republicans lost control of the House, because instead of being a check on this president, they are aiding and abetting this president. Or Trump, because I don't call him the president. He ain't my president. Go to hell as far as I'm concerned. All right. Y'all didn't hear that. Okay, so let's continue here. Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. African-American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. And if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network. PayPal.me/the AHN Show. PayPal.me/the AHN Show. That helps us to keep doing the research, keep doing the broadcast our radio show, pay the bills, etc. All right, let's continue here. So Jeff Sessions, in his letter, his resignation letter, said, "Dear Mr. President, at your request, I am submitting my resignation," end quote. Now, Matthew Whitaker, who's Jeff Sessions' chief of staff, will take over as acting attorney general. Donald Trump said in a tweet announcing the shakeup. Okay, why would you announce this in a tweet? Okay, he did a press conference earlier today, a debacle of a press conference. He didn't announce it then. He waits till he tweets it. Okay, so Trump went on to say, "We thank Attorney General Jeff Sessions for his service and wish him well. A permanent replacement will be nominated at a later date." Now, Trump has regularly attacked the Justice Department and Jeff Sessions, blaming the Attorney General for the specter of the special counsel investigation into ties between Trump's campaign and Russia. And yes, there are a lot of ties. And when hopefully Mueller comes out with his results like tomorrow or today, okay, he needs to come out with it quickly. Okay, Trump has said for months that he wished to replace Jeff Sessions, but lawmakers and administration officials believe that firing the Attorney General before the midterm elections would have had negative consequences for Republicans in tight races. Okay, they were afraid if he did this, if he fired Jeff Sessions before the midterm elections, this would be some type of like admission of guilt or something like that. and it will cause more Republicans to lose seats in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. Let's continue, and we'll come to some of your questions. All right. So Trump has said for months that he wished to replace Sessions. Okay, so it came as little surprise when Jeff Sessions resigned the day after midterm elections were over. Trump blamed Jeff Sessions for recusing himself from overseeing the investigation in the early stages, leading to the appointment of a special counsel. Okay, this is one of the ways you got Robert Mueller. It was because of, and really what brought it about was Trump firing James Comey May 9th, 2016. And because he fired James Comey, then this brought about, and Comey released his memos also, this brought about special counsel Robert Mueller. All right. And Jeff Sessions had to recuse himself. And when Jeff Sessions recused himself, he did the right thing. Even though I don't like Jeff Sessions, and he's a white supremacist, I never liked him, but he did the right thing following Department of Justice policies. Trump doesn't understand any of this. Trump doesn't understand law. He doesn't understand the policies. And Trump said, when he said if he had known that Sessions was going to recuse himself, he would not have nominated him. All right. But it's one white supremacist, nominating another white supremacist. That's what it is. So Trump said he took the job and then he said, I'm going to recuse myself. I said, what kind of man is this? Trump said this year in a Fox News interview. He said, I wanted to stay involved, but when everybody sees, I wanted to stay involved, but when everybody sees what's going on in the Department of Justice, I always put justice now with quotes. Okay. Now, remember, in 1973, it was Richard Nixon's Department of Justice that sued Donald Trump and his daddy for discriminating against African Americans and Hispanics when it came to renting them apartments in Manhattan. He and his daddy settled out of court. Then they were sued 3 years later because they kept doing it. This was Trump. All right. And this is one of the reasons why I think Trump put Dr. Ben Carson over HUD, Housing and Urban Development, because they were violating the Fair Housing Act of 1968. And Trump hates HUD because of the lawsuits from the Department of Justice against he and his father. So he's putting somebody who has absolutely no experience dealing with housing, Dr. Ben Carson, over HUD to basically destroy it. Now, the Deputy Attorney General, now Rod Rosenstein, would normally be in line to become the acting Attorney General. But Donald Trump has complained publicly about Rosenstein as well. Since Jeff Sessions is recused from all election-related matters, Rod Rosenstein oversees the special counsel, Robert S. Mueller III, who was investigating the Trump campaign's interactions with Russia. Such a move might clear the way for Trump to fire Mueller. This is what I'm talking about. This is what Trump ultimately wants to do. To dismiss a special counsel, the president has to order the attorney general, or in the case of a recusal, the deputy attorney general to carry it out. Rod Rosenstein has said that he sees no justification to dismiss Robert Mueller because Rosenstein is following the letter of the law. He's saying Mueller hasn't done anything wrong, there's no violation, so I'm not going to fire him. Now, Trump has already fired James Comey, the FBI director originally overseeing the investigation. In pushing out his attorney general, Trump cast aside one of the earliest and strongest supporters. Okay. And in February 2016, Jeff Sessions became the first sitting U.S. senator to endorse Donald Trump's presidential campaign. And in the months leading up to the election, he became one of the candidate's closest national security advisors. Only weeks after he was confirmed as the United States top law enforcement officer, Sessions became ensnared in the Russia inquiries that have consumed Trump's presidency. He recused himself from overseeing the Justice Department investigation in March of 2017. Okay. After revelations that he had failed to report encounters with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak during the 2016 campaign. At the time, Jeff Sessions said there was nothing nefarious about those meetings, although he acknowledged that he, quote, should have slowed down, end quote, and been more thoughtful in denying any contacts with Russian officials during his Senate confirmation process. His recusal was one of his first public acts as Attorney General. Okay, so you have all this taking place, and it's expected that there are going to be more people leaving the White House. Now, Trump has already had unprecedented turnover in the White House for any first term or first 2 years of a presidency. He's already had unprecedented turnover. Okay, and I'm taking a look at this, see if there's anything else important. All right. How's everybody doing here? So we remember that Jeff Sessions seemed more aligned with the president when he fired Andrew McCabe, deputy FBI director, barely a day before McCabe was due to retire, jeopardizing his pension. Trump for months had publicly berated Andrew McCabe, who's a Republican, because McCabe's wife had run for office as a Democrat with financial support from a friend of Hillary Clinton. So we remember that as well. Okay, so you can check out the rest of this. Now, when we look at Jeff Sessions, right, you all should get this document here. What did Trump do? What did Trump do? Okay. The first 100 days, hashtag stay woke list. What did Trump do? And what this does is this deals with the first 100 days of the Trump administration. And it shows how policies and nominations that Trump did negatively impacted the African American community. And they talk about criminal justice reform, things like that. That's one of the things. That's one of the things they deal with. And they talk about Jeff Sessions. And they talk about how Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced the Department of Justice was ending the National Commission on Forensic Science. That's the National Commission on Forensic Science. Research that. Google that. Most people never heard of it. I deal with this in my lecture called African American Resistance in the Era of Donald Trump, Voter Suppression, Reparations, and How Elections Have Consequences. Okay. This was a commission created by President Obama that Jeff Sessions got rid of. This commission was designed to bring higher scientific standards to forensic techniques to ensure that the people who actually committed the crime are convicted. So this was a commission that President Obama created because when we look at death row inmates, about 50% of the people on death row, especially those exonerated, something like 50% of them were African American. So this was a commission that President Obama created. And he brought in scientists and experts from different fields to make sure that people were not being convicted based upon junk science, okay? To make sure people were not being convicted, to make sure people were not being convicted based upon junk science, all right? And this is something that Jeff Sessions felt that was not needed. And it was, okay? So, check that out. That's the National Commission on Forensic Science. Okay, then on February 28th, in his first public speech as Attorney General, Jeff Sessions said that the Department of Justice will, quote unquote, pull back from using its legal authority to monitor police departments responsible for repeated instances of police misconduct and abuses. Now, this deals with investigations into the patterns and practices of police departments. Now, under the Obama administration, you had the largest number of investigations into the patterns and practices of police departments since the Department of Justice was given that authority going back to the early 1990s. And that was one of the results of the Rodney King beating. Okay, Congress gave the Department of Justice that authority to investigate the police departments. And this oftentimes results in what's called a consent decree. Okay, a consent decree. And that is a agreement between the Department of Justice and the police department to reform certain procedures, behaviors, etc. Okay, and there's oversight by a federal judge. Okay, so you had about 25 investigations into the patterns and practices of police departments under the Obama administration. Nobody wants to talk about that. That resulted in about 14 consent decrees, including the Baltimore Police Department and the Chicago Police Department. All right. So by backing away from that legal commitment first enacted into law by Representative John Conyers as part of the 1994 crime reform legislation. Now this is part of the crime bill. Okay. Now there were some things that were bad about the crime bill. I agree with that. But people need to go read it. Most people talk about the crime bill don't even understand what the hell they're talking about. And also it did not create mass incarceration. It did not help mass incarceration. It made it worse somewhat. The reason why is because 87% of the people who went to prison during the 2 terms of Clinton under the crime bill, they went under state law, not federal law. The crime bill was federal law. The crime bill wasn't state law. Okay, people have to read it. So by backing away from and see state, what happened was, you have to understand history. States had already started passing longer, harsher sentences in the early 1970s and the 1980s, and then going into the 90s. So mass incarceration didn't start in 94. Mass incarceration goes back to the early 1970s. Why? Because June 17th, 1971, Richard Nixon declared his war on drugs. And then in 73 and 74, you have mandatory minimums that start. That comes out of New York. Governor Nelson D. Rockefeller and the Rockefeller drug laws. That's 1973. That's where mandatory minimums start. They didn't start in 94, even though they were part of the 94 crime bill, dealing with that's dealing with federal law and federal crimes. Mandatory minimums go back to 1973. Okay, so people have to understand mass incarceration goes back to the early 70s. That didn't start in 94. So by backing away from that legal commitment, dealing with the consent decrees and investigating police departments, first enacted into law by Representative John Conyers from Detroit as part of the 1994 crime reform legislation, Jeff Sessions sent a signal to the African American community that the police misconduct laws will not be equally and fully enforced. And Sessions and Trump are right here on. I mean, they see eye to eye on this. They do not want, neither Sessions nor Trump wants to hold police accountable for anything. Okay? Neither Sessions nor Trump wants to hold police accountable for anything. Even during the presidential campaign, Mike Pence was on the campaign trail and he said, now keep in mind, Mike Pence was the governor of Indiana, right? So when Kanye West was there at the White House in October 11th, and he's talking about gun violence in Chicago, nobody said, wait a second, a lot of the illegal guns that come into Chicago come from Indiana. A lot of the illegal guns that come into Chicago come from the state of Indiana. Well, who was the governor of the state of Indiana? Mike Pence, who's the vice president. Trump hasn't said anything about that. When he wants to point at Chicago and talk about the crime in Chicago and all this stuff and the killings, Trump hasn't said anything about that. Why don't you ask your vice president about those illegal guns flowing in from Indiana into Chicago? Okay, so, but Mike Pence on the campaign trail said that he and Donald Trump felt that there was too much talk about implicit bias in policing. and that we need to stop talking about. News1.com has the video of this. So if you don't want to deal with implicit bias in policing, which comes out of white supremacy and racism, how are you going to address the issue? So then on February 28th, Donald Trump signed a bill that rolls back a regulation restricting gun purchases by the mentally ill through the use of background checks. And people talking about elections don't have consequences. You're a damn fool. I'm sorry. I don't know where you're getting your information from. You need to do some research. You need to watch my broadcast. Okay? You need to do some research. Okay? Trump, you have to understand, the National Rifle Association spent $30 million to get Trump elected. The National Rifle Association, they operate under the disguise of advocating for gun rights for citizens. No, they really are a lobbying organization for the gun manufacturers. That's what the National Rifle Association really does. So on February 28, 2017, Donald Trump signed a bill that rolls back a regulation. It's an Obama-era regulation restricting gun purchases by the mentally ill through the use of background checks. Then on March 8th, 2017, Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, because see, he's named after a Confederate general, PGT Beauregard, Confederate hero of the Confederacy, because Jeff Sessions from Alabama, right? So when Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was gutted in 2013, and we don't even understand the Voting Rights Act, okay? When Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was gutted by the U.S. Supreme Court case of Shelby County versus Holder, Jeff Sessions cheered the gutting of the Voting Rights Act because the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65 totally changed the lives of these white supremacist segregationists in the South. And they thought that it was an intrusion into their way of life. Okay? They thought it was an intrusion into their way of life. And Jeff Sessions was one of them. You got to study this guy. In 1986, when Jeff Sessions was going through the U.S. Senate confirmation to become a federal judge, 1986, he was deemed too racist to be a federal judge. Coretta Scott King, the widow of Dr. King, wrote an 8 or 9 page letter. And it was recorded. It was recorded on the record, but it wasn't read in the hearing. Okay. Now, Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, she read it. I think it was last year. She was reading some of it on the Senate floor, and this is when Mitch McConnell interrupted her. But if you go research this, Wes Lowry for the Washington Post, I think he wrote the first article about this, and they have the whole letter you can read. What Coretta Scott King was saying was that if Jeff Sessions became a federal judge, it will undo Dr. King's legacy. This is what she's talking about. When you see these old white supremacists, you got to study how far back they go. So on March 8th, 2017, Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III indicated in a memo that he will issue additional guidance to federal prosecutors concerning charging for all criminal cases. This is concerning because it may indicate a departure from Obama-era Department of Justice policies that were, one, designed to give greater latitude to prosecutors in making charging decisions that are appropriate under the circumstances of each case, and two, set forth a series of policies concerning plea agreements, sentencing advocacy, and recidivist enhancements, which are designed to limit application of unfair, one-size-fits-all mandatory minimum penalties. So this was a directive called Smart on Crime in 2013 from then Attorney General Eric Holder. And what it did was it backed off of charging low-level, nonviolent drug offenders, trying to charge them with the longest, harshest sentences. It backed off of that. Jeff Sessions reversed that because, see, Jeff Sessions is one of these old, hardliners when it comes to criminal justice. He's against any type of criminal justice reform. He called it soft on crime. The Smart on Crime initiative, he called it soft on crime. He doesn't want any type of criminal justice reform. He's against legalizing marijuana at all. Okay, he talks about marijuana as a gateway drug, things like this. Now, he accepts that it has medicinal purposes, so he's not attacking that. But recreational marijuana, Jeff Sessions is totally against that. Okay, he does not want to hold police accountable for anything, and this is where Trump and Jeff Sessions they speak the same language, because you haven't heard Trump talking about any type of reform when it comes to policing, any type of national standards for policing, anything like this. You haven't heard Trump talk anything about a national database to keep track of the number of people police officers kill, during the line of duty, things nothing like that. You haven't heard him talk about any type of federal training in implicit bias, anything. Okay. These were all things towards the end of Obama's tenure. They were going to have federal training for something like 30,000 law enforcement officers dealing with implicit bias. You haven't heard anything about that coming from Trump. Now, on March 31st, 2017, Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III directed the Deputy Attorney General and Associate Attorney General to immediately review all Department of Justice activities relating to state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies. This includes 19 current Civil Rights Division consent agreements with troubled police departments nationwide, throwing into question whether they will remain in place. So Jeff Sessions tried to back out of the consent decree agreements with the Chicago Police Department, even though the mayor and the police officials in Chicago said they want this, and he tried to back out of it with the Baltimore Police Department. They launched it in Baltimore largely because of the Freddie Gray case. Sessions tried to back out of this. When they came into office, there was a lawsuit filed on behalf of the Obama administration was involved in a lawsuit against the state of Texas. And this was this dealt with voter suppression in Texas. When Sessions becomes Attorney General, Sessions backs out of that lawsuit. So all of this stuff gets reversed under Trump and Jeff Sessions. Now, this is all stuff most people who talk about not voting don't know about. Now, despite bipartisan support for revamping the nation's drug laws, Attorney General Jeff Sessions indicated that he intends to double down on the war on drugs. So May 12, 2017, Jeff Sessions redeclared the war on drugs that was winding down under the Obama administration. The U.S. prison population dropped to its lowest point in 20 years in December of 2015. It dropped from a peak of 2.3 million down to 1.53 million. That's not me. That's the report from the Department of Justice from December of 2016. Okay? You got to research this stuff. Nobody says, wait a second, the U.S. prison population dropped to its lowest point under President Obama. But see, Trump is against that. Why? Because Core Civic, which used to be called Corrections Corporation of America, and Geo Group, which used to be called Wackenhut, are the two largest owner-operators of privatized prisons. Okay? They donated almost $600,000 to Donald Trump's presidential campaign. So Trump is loyal to them. So in August of 2016, President Obama announced that the federal government was not going to renew contracts for privatized prisons for federal prisoners. What does Trump do? Trump comes into office, he reverses that, and they're going to keep that. Why? Because Trump was financed partly by these two privatized prison owner-operators. Okay? And then Sessions redeclares the war on drugs, May 12, 2017. You think elections don't have consequences? Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III rescinded an Obama-era order to reduce the use of privately operated prisons. The use of privately operated prisons creates a financial incentive to lock people up, usually African American, Latino, and poor people. In addition, and there's some poor white people in prison too. Don't get confused. There's some poor white people in prison also. In addition, in comparison to government operated prisons, privately operated prisons are less safe and secure for both staff and inmates, don't provide the same level of rehabilitative services, okay, like educational programs and job training, which increases the likelihood that those who are released from prison will return to a life of crime. Finally, although privately operated prisons are said to be more cost effective than government operated prisons, they aren't. And there's a whole lot of evidence to prove this. They're not. And see, the goal is not with the privatized prisons, the goal is not for you to come in and get rehabilitation and then leave and not come back. The goal is to keep you coming back. These are publicly traded companies. The stock exchange symbol for Core Civic is CXW. They're traded on the New York Stock Exchange. You need to research them. Go to finance.yahoo.com, finance.yahoo.com, and search for Core Civic, CORECIVIC, Core Civic, okay? And look at their stock. So they profit off of us being locked up. So there's no incentive. There's no incentive for criminal justice reform, for Core Civic and Geo Group, and also another one called G4S. There's no incentive for criminal justice reform. Okay. All right. So that's just a little background information of what happened in the first 100 days dealing with just criminal justice reform. All right. Most people don't know this stuff. So download this document here from cbc.house.gov. cbc.house.gov. Doesn't matter what you think of the Congressional Black Caucus. I could care less. This is dealing with documentation of how the policies from Trump are negatively impacting African Americans. What did Trump do the first 100 days? Hashtag stay woke list. What did Trump do the first 100 days? Hashtag stay woke list. cbc.house.gov. cbc.house.gov. Okay. And if you think you can do a better job than some of those in the Congressional Black Caucus, maybe you should run for their seat and unseat them. Okay. Maybe you should run for their seat and unseat them. All right. So check all that out. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Also, all my DVD lectures are there. You can read all the articles that I write. We have podcasts of our shows also there as well. A lot of information for you. And African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of our broadcast. We'll try to give you a shout out. You can advertise with the African History Network. You can advertise on the podcast of our broadcast, the audio podcast of our broadcast. We're on 6 different podcast platforms. Each episode we reach thousands of people. And email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. And the first month is 50% off, and we'll let you know how you can advertise with us. We'll take your 30-second to 60-second commercial, put it into the audio podcast of our shows. We reach thousands of people with each episode. And if you don't have a commercial, we can record one for you. Okay, advertise with the African History Network. Okay, we'll post that right there. And then also you can donate to the African History Network. If you like this type of information, PayPal.me/the African History Network Show. PayPal.me/the African History Network. I'm sorry, PayPal.me/the AHN Show. That helps us keep doing the research. This is a lot of research. Helps us stay on the air. Helps us keep broadcasting and pay the bills, etc. PayPal.me/the AHN Show. Okay, so somebody asked, so what do we do now? cbc.house.gov, Renee. cbc.house.gov. Okay. Download that. And then also at cbc.house.gov, download this. So a lot of people say, well, we don't have an agenda. We don't have an agenda. That's not true. There have been a number of agendas. You just haven't read them. This is from the Congressional Black Caucus also. Now, I'm not saying this is the only agenda, but this is the 125-page agenda that they presented to Donald Trump when they met with him March of 2017. It's called, now remember Trump during the last part of the campaign, he asked black people, what the hell do you have to lose? This is called We Have a Lot to Lose. Solutions to Advance Black Families in the 21st Century. Okay? This is from the Congressional Black Caucus. It's free. You can download it. Now, it didn't come like this. I downloaded it and took it to the printer and got it printed up. It's a little beat up because it's like carried with me wherever I go. It's in my backpack. But what they do, what it does is, the first thing they do is they lay out history dealing with African Americans and how we got into the predicament we're in right now. They lay out history, okay? They deal with slavery and Reconstruction and Great Migration, Great Depression, Jim Crow, civil rights, all that stuff. Then they lay out issues pertaining to the African American community, whether you're dealing with voting rights and voter suppression, economic justice, education, workforce, healthcare, environmental justice, rural America. Because about 50% of African Americans live in rural America. Rural America is not just white people. About 50% of Africa, all of us don't live in the inner city, contrary to what Trump thinks. All of us don't live in inner city Detroit and Chicago and Gary, Indiana. About 50% of African Americans live in the rural areas also. Deals with rural America. So they break down issues that we're dealing with. And then one of the most important things they do is they then lay out policies. They lay out actual policies to address these problems. And they have the bill number, the number of the bill here, all this stuff. They lay out policies. So now so you don't have to like all of this. And I'm not saying you should. Okay, you may or may not. However, if you are a member of African American organizations across the country, there's stuff in here that you can take out of here to make a part of your agenda, your platform for your organization. And then this gives you actual legislation, actual policies to push to your elected officials at the city, county, state, and national level to get behind, okay? To get these policies passed to address issues, okay? And then also, if you visit our website, we have a recommended reading list of books. All right? And Powernomics is one of them on here. Now, Powernomics came out in 2004. I like this because I love Dr. Claude Anderson. Dr. Claude Anderson is one of my teachers. A lot of people quote him. He's one of my teachers. I actually know him. I just interviewed him October 28th. If you missed the interview, right here on Facebook, the African History Network, click on videos. You can see the interview I did with them. And then at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, click on listen to podcasts. The audio of the podcast is there. So, people send me videos. You see what Doc said, blah, blah, blah. I said I could pick up the phone and call Doc, to find out what he said. So, Powernomics, the national plan to empower Black America. There are things we can take from here. You don't have to agree with everything in here, okay? There's some things we take in here. Some of it is theory, but there's some things we could take from that as well. But the foundation, and this is Dr. Claude Anderson's latest book, A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask, okay? Now, I've been studying history for 26 years, so my understanding of history is much broader than some other people. Just like a lot of people never read this book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep. A lot of these authors, I know them, okay? And you hear the interviews I do with a lot of these scholars. This deals with the African presence in this country we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years, because this was our land stolen from us. We were here before Native Americans came into existence. That does not mean the transatlantic slave trade did not happen, okay? Before the Mayflower is a good book. My copy is beat up, it's old. Before the Mayflower is a good book. But we were here tens of thousands of years before August 20th, 1619, okay? So two of my teachers, and then also you want to read, you got this book right here is imperative to get. This is imperative to get. How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy, okay? And this is similar to Black Labor, White Wealth by Dr. Claude Anderson. This is similar, but it's much more concentrated. This is Black Labor, White Wealth by Dr. Claude Anderson. I got this back in, 94, 95, okay? So see how long I've been studying, all right? But this right here is put out by the Nation of Islam Research Group. This is one of the most powerful books. The reason why this book right here, this costs $10. You can get it from noi.org, Nation of Islam Research Group. What this book does is it takes you through history, and it takes you through all of the laws that were put in place to help put us right in the predicament we are right now. And they deal with it pretty much chronologically, okay? They deal with the theft of land, the Homestead Act of 1862, the Southern Homestead Act of 1866, the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887. They deal with policies from President Roosevelt in the New Deal. And even though some of the policies were beneficial to African Americans during the Great Depression, and the Great Depression was horrible for white people, it was death for us. But there were some policies, because they put the resources into the hands of the states, when they were allocated out, we were discriminated against. They deal with the Social Security Administration, created in 1935, the Minimum Wage Act, created in 1935, the Federal Housing Administration, created in 1934, that's going to discriminate in the loans given out for home mortgages. The Homeowners Loan Corporation, created in 1933, that creates the redlining process that the Federal Housing Administration and banks are going to use to make loans that lock us out of a lot of these loans that our taxpayer dollars are paying for. Okay, so we have to understand that here. Most of us don't understand that history of what happened. So as Professor James Small and Dr. Leonard Jeffries correctly teach us, and these are two of my teachers, and you've heard my interviews with them. They talk about the pyramid principle. And the pyramid principle, you look at a pyramid. I usually show a pyramid of Khafre at Giza. The pyramid has three sides. The foundation is African history and culture. The foundation is African history and culture. Our history and culture gives us our VIPs, our values, our interests, and our principles. Our values, our interests, and our principles. It influences the two sides of the pyramid. It influences our economic empowerment, or what I call economic guerrilla warfare. And it influences our political empowerment, okay? As Dr. Leonard Jeffries correctly teaches us, we have to have a synthesis of all three. And Professor James Small says the same thing. We have to have a synthesis of all three. It's not just one. It's not just economic empowerment. Because trying to create an economic base with a European colonized mind is not going to work. Trying to create an economic base with a European colonized mind, and many African Americans have been taught to hate who they are and love who they can't be, that's not going to work. We have to, the foundation is our history and our culture. We have to reclaim that. It's your history and culture gives you a cultural paradigm that you see reality through. And because our history and culture has been stolen from us, for the most part, a European cultural paradigm has been superimposed upon us. We've been taught to see reality through the eyes of Europeans. So we've been taught if something is good for them, it's necessarily good for us. And that may not be the case. Okay? And so we have to have a total re-education program. This is what Malcolm said in the Ballad of the Bullet. He talked about we need to have a total re-education program. Okay? So we have to reclaim our history and culture. This influences our economics. This influences our politics. Okay? And we have to, right now, African Americans spend about 3% of our disposable income with people that don't look like us. If you look at the study from the Kellogg School of Management, Northwestern University, which is one of the top business schools in the country. I couldn't afford to go to the Kellogg School of Management. I went to Wayne State's business school in Detroit, Wayne State University. If 100,000 African American households that have annual incomes of $75,000 or more, if they spent one out of every $10, that's 10%, with African American owned businesses, it can create 500,000 to 1 million jobs. So what we need to focus, and this is why, even though I'm all for creating more businesses is not the issue. The problem is that we're not allocating more of our disposable income to spend with our businesses. That's the problem. How do we know? Okay, so survey of black-owned businesses, Census Bureau, 2007, 1.9 million African-American-owned businesses. Average income was like $110,000 per business. 2012, 2.6 million businesses, 2.6 million black-owned businesses, but the average revenue of those businesses was about 54,000. Now, this was during the recovery from the recession, things like this, right? But it's not just more businesses. We have to attack the psyche and put in place infrastructures for African Americans to spend more dollars with our own businesses. One of the things everybody can do is make a list of your monthly expenditures and the businesses you spend your money with and redirect at least 10% to African American owned businesses. Because if we, so the last study that I know of from the Census Bureau survey of black owned businesses, that was 2012. This is 2018. So it's probably a good 3 million. We could have 5 million. If 5 million is still fighting over the same 3%, it's not accomplishing anything. Then the other thing is that only 100,000 of those 2.6 million businesses have employees. So it's about 1 million, maybe 1.5 million employees. Okay. So this is why my whole strategy of this is different, because my research background is different, right? So if you have about, say hypothetically it's 3 million businesses and they have 1.5 million employees, all right? Well, there are almost 20 million African Americans in the labor force either working or looking for work. So what that means is that the structure of African American owned businesses is not broad enough. The revenue is not enough to support the majority of African Americans even working for our own businesses. So what has to happen? So there's still going to be a lot of us working for white people. I'm just telling you, that ain't going to change next week. They ain't going to, no. See, the people who keep talking about we need more businesses, they're not dealing with this holistically. And nobody's going to tell you, wait a second, you got about 20 million African Americans. Go to BLS.gov, Bureau of Labor Statistics. Research African American owned businesses and research how many African Americans are in the labor market. About 20 million, because as of 2016, it was projected to be 19.6 million. It's probably over 20 million. I'm just being generous. I'm just saying, okay, let's go with 20 million. All right. So if we're saying that, wait a second, we need to quit our jobs and start working for white people, you can quit your job if you want to. I mean, no. Now, when I teach entrepreneurship, I tell people, one, don't quit your day job. Start your business while you're working. Because about 51% of all new businesses, or somewhere around there, don't make a profit till their third year in business. So if you think you're gonna quit your job and get a salary from the business you just started up 2 weeks ago, that, as Dr. Claude Anderson said, that dog won't even hunt. It doesn't work like that. Okay, so this is why we have to have practical strategies for this. We have to have practical strategies for this, and we have to have a combination of economic empowerment and political empowerment. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the adoption, and their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Okay, and we need all three. It's not just economics. It's not just politics. It's not just African history and culture. We have to have a synthesis. As Dr. Linda Jeffrey says, we have to have a synthesis. It's all three. One of the three ain't gonna work. One of the three is not going to work. Okay. All right. And the other thing that we have to understand is that all of the issues that we complain about, politics are involved in. Most of the complaints that we have, most of the issues we complain about, are usually the side effects of bad public policies. Okay, this is why that has to be attacked. This is why that has to be reversed. This is why those policies have to be changed. Okay. And if you listen to the interview that I did with Dr. Claude Anderson, October 28th, we talked about leveraging our economics to enforce our politics, leveraging our economics to enforce our politics. And, you know, I deal with redistribute concepts of redistributing the pain, redistribute, redirect, or renegotiate. If you get my lecture that I did is a 4-hour lecture called Redistributing the Pain, How African Americans Historically Fought Back with Economic Boycotts. Redistributing the Pain, How African Americans Historically Fought Back with Economic Boycotts. And I break a lot of this stuff down, okay? Redistribute, redirect, and renegotiate. Redistribute the pain of those inflicting pain upon us through targeted, sustained economic withdrawal strategies. Redirect dollars to African American owned businesses so we can become the largest employers of our own people. That's going to take time. That's going to 10, 15, 20 years. That's going to take time. It's not going to be in the next 2 years. That's going to take time, okay? And then also renegotiate our relationship with corporate America so we get a greater return on the dollars that we spend with them in the form of vendor contracts, in the form of them putting money into African American owned banks, in the form of them spending more money with African American owned media, TV stations, radio stations, things like this. That all when they buy ads on TV One, that generates revenue for TV One for them to pay their employees. Okay, when the movie Black Panther debuted February 16th and leading up to that, they were running ads on TV One, which is African American owned. That generates revenue for TV One. Okay? So when people are talking about, oh, people didn't make money, black people didn't make money from the movie Black Panther, you damn fool. You have no clue what you're talking about. Not only that, do you realize a lot of the movie Black Panther was filmed at Tyler Perry Studios in Atlanta? Last time I checked, he was black. Do you understand that $89.3 million, about $89 million was injected into the Georgia economy because of the filming of the movie Black Panther? They hired 3,000 Georgians working surrounding that movie. A lot of them were African American. I'm like, what are you talking about? But see, this is what happens when you have bad information. You make stupid decisions. This is an example of that. Okay. All right. So we have to take our minds back. Bantu Stephen Biko, one of our great South African freedom fighters, he said the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Okay, so we have to take our minds back. Then also, people need to read this document. Because when I travel and I do lectures and I listen to what people say, I can tell what they haven't read. This is from whitehouse.gov. This is called Progress of the African American Community During the Obama Administration. Progress of the African American community during the Obama administration. This is from whitehouse.gov. It's still there. Trump didn't take it down. It's still there. So what this does is this shows how policies from President Obama positively impacted the African American community, and they break it down. It's categorized. Okay, you know, they talk about one of the things they deal with is the Affordable Health Care Act. A lot of people don't know that because of the Affordable Health Care Act, 3 million non-elderly African Americans got health insurance who did not already have it. Number one reason why people file for bankruptcy is because of medical bills. When you can get affordable health care, you can get preventive health care, it reduces your it reduces your costs, lessens the chance of you having to file for bankruptcy, which deals with your economic condition, deals with your finances. And then also so what happened was the uninsured rate for African Americans dropped to its lowest point in the history of this country, down to 10%, the uninsured rate. The life expectancy for African Americans extended to its longest point in history of this country, 72.5 years, directly tied to the Affordable Health Care Act, which also generated about 1 million jobs as well. That's policy. That's politics. That's law. That's legislation. Okay, so people have, everywhere I go, I ask people have they read this. Nobody's read it. Now, I found out about it from Andre Michael Eglishon, who sometimes guest hosts Reverend Al Sharpton's radio show, Keeping It Real. Some people don't like Sharpton. I'm not into personalities. I'm dealing with facts and evidence. I'm dealing with policies. I'm not tied up on personalities. To hell with that. And this is why when I ask people, have you not listened to listen to things people say? Like nobody says, well, wait a second, U.S. prison population dropped to its lowest point in 20 years under President Obama. I don't even think that's in here. That's Newsweek.com had an article about that, and they have a link to the Department of Justice report dealing with that. People don't say, well, wait a second, it was President Obama that paid the black farmers their $1.2 billion settlement from their lawsuit. But see, this is what happens when you don't do research. And then you have people that say, I was on a radio show, Pastor Mo's show Sunday night, and somebody called in and said, oh, President Obama should have nominated an African-American woman Supreme Court Justice. Okay. But nobody says that he nominated 62 African-Americans to the federal court. And that's a lifetime appointment. And 26 of them, if I remember correctly, 26 of them were African-American females. Nobody talks about that. I wonder why. That's a lifetime appointment. President Obama has made 62 lifetime appointments of African-Americans to serve on the federal bench. And this included 26 African-American women appointed to the federal court, which is more African-American women appointed by any president in history. Okay. All right, so look. Okay, you have a troll. Black people can't be racist. You need to do some research. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, which comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy. Racism occurs when one race of people control the majority of the wealth, power, resources, benefits, privileges, land, access to education, access to opportunity, media, access to jobs, etc. And they use that to marginalize, subordinate, and do harm to another race of people. This is done for the purpose of preserving genetic white survival. Okay, so, you need really do some research before you come on here with that nonsense. All right. Okay, everybody. So, the day after the midterm elections, be sure to watch Roland Martin's daily digital show. Roland called me today. Let me talk for a few minutes. Roland Martin Unfiltered. It airs live 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday on Facebook, on his Facebook page, and YouTube, Roland Martin. We share it here. It's one of the best shows. It's one of the best shows. And there's a ton of information. So he'll be on today. And let me see. So how many African-American business owners do we have here? Post the name of your business here. And if if you have a clothing store, if you are a book author, if you have an event bringing in African-centered scholars, if you have a business that sells products to African Americans, you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, and we can get you up and running today. Customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Okay. So Andrew Gillum, a lot of people were upset about Andrew Gillum. Now, last I heard, they were still tallying the votes. He was down about 50,000. If it's a 1% threshold, it's an automatic recount. And last night, this morning on the Tom Joyner Morning Show, Roland was on twice on the Tom Joyner Morning Show. And he talked to the Gillum campaign, and he said the reason why Andrew conceded so quickly last night is because the amount of votes that he was down and the amount of votes that was still out to be counted, they did not think that he could make up that ground. Okay, so they conceded. However, if something happens and it's a recount, then they'll let the recount happen and follow from that, most likely. Okay. Stacey Abrams, last I heard before I started this broadcast, they're still tallying the votes. And there's some stuff going on in Georgia. I mean, this is rampant voter suppression. I think there was probably some voter suppression in Florida. But there's some straight up voter suppression in Georgia. And once again, this is a lesson to people. If your vote does not matter, Why were they working so hard in Georgia to suppress the African American vote? And then when you look at people are talking about the white women vote in Florida and Georgia, and basically about 74-75% of white women voted for the white candidates for governor. Okay. In Florida, Roland talked about this last night on his broadcast. He did a 5-hour broadcast, election returns broadcast. In Florida, you have 5 million registered voters in Florida who did not vote. 5 million registered voters in Florida who did not vote. So I'm not concerned about white women. I want to know what percentage of that 5 million were African Americans who were registered to vote and did not vote. See, I'm not now. 24-25% of white women, I think, did the right thing. But my focus is not on white women doing the right thing. In situations like that, that's not my real focus. Because they voted for white supremacy. That's not my real focus. My focus is on us. What do we do? Did we sit at home? Did we vote for Ron DeSantis? What did we do? In Georgia, I don't know what percentage of African Americans who were registered to vote did not vote. I don't know that yet for Georgia. Okay, but you know, if you saw my broadcast yesterday, it was crazy. There were irregularities, long lines, voting machines that didn't work, all different types of things like that going on in Georgia. All right, but that's a bad sister right there, Stacey Abrams. Okay. All right. Yeah, so Brian Kemp is the Secretary of State there in Georgia, and Stacey Abrams has sued Brian Kemp in the past, even before this election, when she was with the Georgia Voters Project or something like that. She sued Brian Kemp before and won because of voter suppression. Okay, so we have to do better. We have to do better. And here's something that you're going to find out. And I'm convinced of this. You have some black people who do not want things to change, who do not want things to get better, because they just want to keep complaining about how bad things are, and they want other people to be as miserable as they are. You just have some black people, because when you ask them, okay, what should we do? They say we should separate. Okay, go ahead and leave. I'm all for repatriation to Africa. It has its place. But when people say, okay, the solution is separate, then why is your ass still here? Because, see, when you ask them, when you ask them what should we do, they can't tell you. A lot of them just want to be miserable. They want everybody else to be miserable. They don't want anything to change, or they just want to profit off of your misery, okay? And sell you conspiracy theories and all type of nonsense. And then the people who say, okay, we need to separate. My response is go ahead and leave. Repatriation to Africa has its purpose, but if you actually understand history, African people were in this land that we call the United States of America at least 51,700 years ago. We've been here continuously. We did not first come here as slaves, okay? This was our land stolen from us. The Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet. They come from southern Africa. They're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They go all around the world. They were here. They were building pyramid mounds up and down the Mississippi River. This was our land taken from us. If we talk about separating, why should we leave? Last hired, first fired. We weren't the last people that came. White people came long after us. So when we talk about separating, why should we be the ones who leave? This was our land stolen from us. It was stolen more than once. Because also, from 1920 to 1975, we lost about 14 million acres of land. The land was stolen from us more than once. The Dawes Allotment Act of 1887 redistributed 138 million acres of land. It was supposed to go to black Indians and Native Americans. 2/3 went to white people. The land was stolen from us more than once. You're dealing with, when you read this book, How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy. You're dealing with the theft of 2.3 billion acres of land from African people and Native Americans here in this land. So why should we be the ones to leave? Okay? But the people who say we need to separate, we need to go back to Africa, okay, leave. There ain't no need to discuss it. Don't have to do a lecture about it. Send me a postcard. Okay? But see, and I agree with Dr. John Henrik Clarke on this, one of our great Grandmaster Scholar Warriors. And Dr. John Henrik Clarke wrote Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, Slavery and the Rise of European Capitalism. He wrote African People in World History. He wrote a number of books. But Dr. Clarke used to say, don't come to me talking that nation stuff, things like that. He said, until you have acquired the skills that are needed to manage a nation, until you have acquired the skills of agriculture, oceanography, you understand how to manage a government, a political government. You understand economics. We have to, if you want to deal with quote unquote separating, we have to acquire the skills needed to govern a nation. Most of the people talking about separating not doing that. They just have a fantasy type version or mindset of doing this, of separating. So it doesn't make any sense. Acquire the skills necessary to manage a nation. But if you want to repatriate back to Africa, that takes planning. That's not just something you just do and just pick up and leave. And it helps if you have some skills to take over there with you. All right. Am I doing that? No, I have no plans to leave. This is our land stolen from us. Now, I'll go visit Africa, but I have no plans. I have no plans to leave. And we need to build. And Dr. Claude Anderson, I talked to him before the interview I did October 28th. I talked to him a few days before that. And he said that before we go over trying to help Africa, he said we need to strengthen ourselves and build our foundation here. So we have something to take over there to them. So we have something to help them with. He said we have to cast your buckets where you are. We have to build our foundation here. So, all right. Okay, guys, visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We need your support. That helps us stay on the air. Also, we have the bundle pack. We have the DVD bundle pack, the 8 DVD bundle pack. You'll love this. The Africans who were here before Columbus. The Africans who were here before Columbus. 8 DVD bundle pack. It includes a double lecture from myself and Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. Okay. And it includes a lecture from Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, who wrote the book, They Came Before Columbus. Includes a lecture from Dr. John Henrik Clarke, dealing with Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust. It includes a double lecture from me dealing with Columbus, Christopher Columbus, as well as the history of Halloween, because Columbus Day and Halloween are in the same month. Okay, maybe because Columbus Day is a joke. I don't know. But see, the interesting thing about Columbus, what a lot of people don't know, is Columbus never came to this land we call the United States of America. The closest he comes here is Cuba, which is 90 miles away. Okay, so we have that bundle pack. It's right on the home page. It's an 8 DVD bundle pack. The Africans who were here before Columbus. Okay, so you can order that also. And we have some of my bundle packs there as well. And I teach online courses. So we have the online class. We have the bundle pack. It's a 10-course online bundle pack. They're all on demand. They're all on demand, online courses I've taught. and it includes ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, and that is a 14-hour, 7-session online course that deals with thousands of years of history. And we don't start in slavery. We go back, you know, we deal with 50,000, 100,000 years of history, dealing with archaeological discoveries. We deal with ancient Egypt. We deal with the history of the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors that lead up to the transatlantic slave trade happening. Then there's some other courses in that bundle pack as well, including Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. That's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. It's a 10-course online bundle pack. It's all on demand. Watch at your own pace. Okay, Rio said, how Americans hate Hispanic people but give a Spanish guy a holiday. Well, that was the Italians that fought for Columbus to have a holiday because he was Italian. He was actually Italian. So that was the Italians that fought for that, okay? But the reason why Hispanics speak Spanish is because their countries were conquered by Spain. So that European language is forced upon them, just like you had the English colonies, and in the eastern portion of this country, you had the English colonies. So some of our ancestors were brought to the English colonies, even though we were already here. And even in 1607, Jamestown, Virginia, Captain John Smith said that he was captured by a group of black Indians. Dr. David Imhotep deals with this in The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. And his new book comes out by Thanksgiving, because I talked to him about 2 weeks ago. He has a new book, First Americans Were Africans Revisited. It has about 200 additional pages. Okay. The Spaniards only funded his voyages. Yeah, the Spanish crown funded his voyages, yeah. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. And he struck a deal with them where he would keep 10% of the riches that he stole. All right, guys, look, we have to get out of here. Hey, remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. Listen to our show Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on 9:10 a.m. The Superstation WFDF in Detroit. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, for our DVD lectures, online courses, audio podcasts of our shows, and also we have the recommended reading list of books there. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Remember, right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.